Hello, Dakota. How you doing? I've got your work up right here. I've got your sketches. Looking really good. Nice presentation. Good job on your sketches. I did want to address something that you had written now. This is a good introduction to the project. Thank you for including that. Right here, you're asking about this and was shot by the Taliban. I say no. I say definitely not on the front. Let me give you my reasoning for that. So I think Malala and then your tagline, the girl who stood up for education, I think that's fine. I don't even think you need the parentheses. I just think the girl who stood up for education, I think that really, it draws us a lot of really interesting ties. It's a very basic comment. And it really, I think it draws a nice tie between Malala and the young girls who she stood up for. Or I should say the young people that she stood up for and actually risked her life in doing so. I think that attempted assassination is a negative point in her life that we can, but a very relevant point. And I think that's something we can introduce. But I think it would be best if we were to introduce that in the meat of the work. And that's in the back of the poster, either in the biographical information or the timeline itself. But as an introduction, let's concentrate on the positive that Malala did as opposed to the attempted assassination. Not that that's not an important factor. It is, but I think we concentrate on positivity in the front of the poster and then move to the facts in the back of the poster. Okay, that's my reasoning behind that. So let's go ahead and take a look at your sketches. I think your sketches are good. You're showing your title, your laureate, and then the tagline on the front of your posters, and that's fantastic. And then in the back, you're showing placement of your image, and then your timeline and the placement of your biographical information. You've got some interesting timeline shapes and things going on here. This one I think is interesting because the timeline actually is at the same angle as the Y in her last name, and that creates an interesting connection between the front and the back of the poster. I think that's really interesting. This is an interesting way to go to establishing your composition on a grid and then rotating the grid or tilting the grid a little bit. So it's all good stuff, right? But the one thing I'm not seeing, well, actually, before I talk about that, I want to mention some of the requirements of the assignment. So if we jump over to the assignment itself, right? Where the heck is it? Oh, right over here. So let's jump up here and take a look at what's due this week. Week 5, milestone for week 5 is this researcher laureate provide their name, which you did, but we need biography paragraphs. So I need you to give me, for Sunday, include the biography paragraphs you intend on using, include the photo you intend on using, and also the information and dates for your timeline. So we really need to get that front end work out of the way. So let's get that submitted for Sunday. If you take a look at some of your other classmates' posts, you'll see good examples of how they have included biographical information. The paragraphs that will be included in the biography, the photo, or several photos which they are considering using, and then the dates of the timeline itself. All right, now we jump to the sketches. Here are the sketches right here. And I think the sketches are fine, right? And they're good. They're good. And especially down here where we start getting into this possibility of designing the front and the back at the same time and creating these visual consistencies and these visual continuations that draw a tight concept between the front and the back of the poster. That's great. I think these are the strongest examples for that reason. However, I think that we could draw a further and a tighter conceptual development and conceptual ties. Let me show you what I mean. All right, here's a great example. I've been sharing this. If you've looked at some of the other videos, you see I'm sharing this because it's such a good example. But this is using one of the strategies of visual substitution, and this is a good presentation. And I encourage you to read this again. I'm sure you've already read it once. Read it again, and then a third time after that. Really let this sink in, especially these strategies and these examples. And one of these strategies is called visual substitution. And this is an example of visual substitution right here. This designer, Martin Luther King, is very legible, right? But this designer has substituted the equal sign in for the E, which plays a great part in the E, but it also adds a very tight conceptual approach here in that Martin Luther King did stand for equality, and that's indicated right here. And that's a strong concept. And to add continuation from this concept through to the back of the poster, the designer has elected to use the equal sign for the timeline. So this is strong conceptual development. And I'd like to see that in your sketches. So in summary, I'd like to see some stronger conceptual development in your sketches. I'd also like to see you include that other information, specifically the right here, the name, biography paragraphs, photo, and the dates that you would plan on, dates and events you plan on including in the timeline. Okay, I do have a little something here for you, and I want to describe this, and maybe this will spark some creativity in you. But this is another poster that I had saved as an example for excellence from a previous class. But if we take a look at the front of the poster, we can see nice typography, right? Good, great tagline, good typography. The grid has been tilted a little bit. You know, there's a lot of people that say, and let's go back to your sketches, you can see one of your sketches is tilted this way. There's a lot of people that believe that if you're going to rotate a grid, do it counterclockwise so that the type doesn't look like it's falling downhill, because that creates kind of a negative connotation in that the type it also creates the illusion of imbalance. So think about that, and try a couple of you. If you're feeling it, try to remember that if you're going to rotate the grid, go ahead and do it counterclockwise as opposed to clockwise like we see here. See how even in a sketch it kind of looks like that's kind of falling downhill. It's, you know, I happen to agree with that theory. I don't know if you do or not. If you do, please feel free to employ it in your work. If you don't, then please feel free to employ it also. I mean, that's one personal preference that I have, is to, when rotating a grid, rotate it counterclockwise. Okay, so what we have here, and this is in terms of conceptual development. Now, there's nothing here really that's been taken out of her life or researched, or, you know, there's no visual attribute here that we're creating meaning with. But what we are doing here is we're creating a good harmony and using that harmony to build the visual concept between the front and the back of the poster. Now, one of the things I think that is important to look at in any two-sided or multi-page layout is the fact that does it look like it was designed simultaneously by the same designer at the same time? And that's what we're shooting for, and that would point to a high degree of harmony and consistency. Okay, so what do we have here? We have the front of the poster, and there's attributes in the front of the poster that are carried through the back of the poster, but more importantly, there are attributes in the back of the poster that are carried through the front, specifically the image. This designer started with the image, which is a great starting point, as we have learned in this week's lectures, working with image and type. You start with the image, pick out what can we use in the image. This designer has used the color scheme, as well as, and I'm going to zoom in here, and hopefully you'll see this right here. See those little patterns on her sleeves? Duplicated right here, okay? Also duplicated right here. So that's a really interesting way to approach this. So we've got this really super cohesive, highly harmonious piece that introduces and continues continuation of not only the rotated grid, but the color application as well as the design elements, all taken from right within the image. Okay, so I thought that's a really interesting approach here, and that's something that you might consider in your sketches. Now, again, in summary, I would like to see that biographical information, that you're going to use the verbiage for the biographical information, as well as the verbiage and the dates for your timeline. And then also, I'd like to see a few more sketches and really try to establish a solid visual approach, a solid visual conceptual development for the work. Okay? Now, if you have any questions, please let me know. But let's see those changes by Sunday's submission. All right? Thanks, Dakota.